Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, culture, content, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest, Morgan McLintic. He is the founder of Firebrand Marketing. They are a marketing shop in Silicon Valley. They work on all types of companies, from tech startups all the way through to big brands. Morgan has been there, done that in the Silicon Valley marketing scene, and comes to us from big agency life, but now he's on his own and has his own shop. So Morgan, welcome to the show. Thank you for spending the time.
Adam, it's great to see you again, and thanks for inviting me on. Looking forward to our discussion today.
And for those who probably don't know, I used to work for Morgan in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. So Morgan was actually my boss. I reported into Morgan. We worked together on projects. So if you ever want to hear interesting stories about me, reach out to Morgan on LinkedIn. I'm sure he has a few.
That's right. That's right. And that's before you were tempted away by an internet company called Google.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually never intended to work at a large company. And, to their credit, they kept me for 7 years. So that's a pretty good run before I think I decided, you're a company called Firebrand. And I've actually been called a firebrand before. I love that term. So it's interesting that I managed to stay at a big company that long. Do you tend to see for your clients, actually, before we even get into your survey, what's the archetype of a senior marketer these days? I'm genuinely curious.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have come up sort of through the ranks, but the survey that we did was 250 senior marketers, and we classified that as sort of director and above. So it's directors, VPs, and CMOs, and we work with tech companies, right? Early stage, late stage, tech startups, and I think we're all working away on our business, learning the lessons that we can learn. But it's interesting to take a step back and see, hey, what are the challenges everybody else is facing? And a bit like the sort of ethos behind the podcast here, where we can all sort of learn from each other. We thought, well, we'll do a survey. So we asked 250 startup marketers, just how are you doing? And I know not everybody's in the tech space, but it's been a tough couple of years for startups. The amount of funding has gone down. A lot of startups sell to each other, so that's sort of compressed buying a little bit. But actually, we found that about 59% of startups are ahead of their targets. So, you feel like, hey, it's a recessionary area, but people are feeling pretty confident out there, which surprised me.
So, yeah, I'm sorry I didn't intro. One of the reasons I wanted to have Morgan on is he ran this survey, which you'll be able to get soon. We'll update the show with a link to that. If it's not available now, we'll make sure that you get a link to it when we send this out. But do you want to share, any other kind of cool key findings on where marketers are at? And we can sort of take it.
Yeah, we'll just dive into that. Yeah, we'll just dive into that. And look, we're finding that like early stage companies are doing a little bit better, 64% ahead of their target, compared to late stage companies, 53%. 22% of them were on target and 17% are behind. And so what are the spaces that are doing well? Well, it turns out that cybersecurity, those guys are ahead, 79%. If you're working in a cybersecurity startup, 79% of those guys are ahead of their target. AI, I mean, of course, we'll talk about AI in a bit, no doubt, but 71% of those guys are ahead of their target, with SaaS third. People at the back, well, if you're working in a hardware or semiconductor startup, only 38% of those startups are ahead of their targets. But what we also asked them, so that surprised me, right? Because you'd think in a recession people would be behind. But what are their other challenges, right? They're getting some challenges in buyer behavior. And the main change there is buyers are looking for shorter term contracts. 28% of companies said, hey, look, the prospects we're talking to want shorter deals. So you're taking longer to get shorter deals. And a large number of them also are finding towards the end of the buy cycle, a new person comes in, it could be a new CFO, it could be a CISO that disrupts that buy cycle. And so deals are getting sort of stretched out. They're being short in terms of sales. They're shorter, and they're getting more complex. So I thought that was, we certainly see that, but the data bears it up too.
That's interesting. And that kind of speaks to perhaps the importance of making sure you've got a rock solid, marketing automation system or just lead nurturing system where you're bringing along maybe not just that decision maker, but additional people at the company as well, in case there's continued churn. That way you don't lose all the momentum when it's like, this company is probably going to make a purchase, and hopefully it's you can make sure that you're not losing that work.
Right. I mean, look, we've seen a lot of layoffs going on in tech. And so you can spend months nurturing that prospect only to have them laid off or be replaced, and you've got to start again. So keeping track of people and trying to compress the deals as much as possible I think is really important, because any given day the buyers could change.
Yeah. So I know you have a lot of stats in the survey, and we'll link this, but since you've done the analysis already, do you want to just wave a magic wand and tell us, what do you think these findings sort of mean for the near term and maybe a little bit longer term?
Yeah, I think it means that H2, the survey is called the Startup Marketer Outlook, and it's going to come out at the end of this month. And it means for H2, most people are going to be confident in hitting their numbers. They're confident in having bigger teams and getting more budget. They are getting pressure from their VCs to get more efficient, but we're seeing the people's confidence of becoming more efficient, more data-led is going down. So basically all the juice has been squeezed out of that. We're about at peak efficiency when it comes to marketing. So the next level is, how do we open up the budgets if we want to do more? Because doing more with less has been a long time, but I feel like marketing teams are at their limit and they don't feel confident that they can squeeze more out of it.
So Morgan, one thing that's unique to you is you've experienced several cycles in Silicon Valley consistently, though you've always been in marketing and comms. I feel like a lot of Silicon Valley is kind of people chasing their tail. They go from being a social media expert to then being an SEO, or then they go to work in sales. And I like that you've stayed focused. You're kind of an old school Don Draper type, character for PR. Where you've always been just very good at narrative. You've taken companies public. You've kind of been there, done that. What's different? What feels different about this cycle versus some of the previous cycles that you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, over that time, so I started out in PR over 25 years ago. And so what has changed? Look, two things. One, everything has become faster, and it's also become more complex. So when I started in PR, we were sending press releases in the postal mail to reporters and then calling them on the phone later to follow up with that, right? So today, that's definitely not the case, right? You've got far more channels, and the cycles are a lot quicker, and you see that across the board, right? There's just far more ways for brands to reach their target audiences, and they have much less control over their brand. But marketing programs then are far more sort of ephemeral. They just don't last that long. So you have to, the pace of it is a lot quicker, which is fun, right? But you see that the role of a marketer is a lot more complex, right? Now you have tools like AdQuick, right? You got a a lot of data where you can take, you used to be able to have media plan over a long time, and you had no data to see how many impressions you might get from any given billboard or what have you. And now that's completely changed. You can do them on a much more fast-paced, tactical basis, and you can see the data of how many people are using that, which helps you with your attribution. Now, what does that mean for a marketer? You have to understand all that, right? You have to understand the marketing tech stack and how they integrate, and you've just become a much more technical person overall. And I feel like that is brilliant, and it's provided a lot more opportunity for marketers and become much more data driven. But the challenge that we have to have, the challenge which we have there, is we've also got to make sure that we are staying creative. Right? We have to have the big ideas, because you can fall into the sort of trap of incrementalism in marketing, where you're just making small changes, taking small risks, and that just doesn't move the needle. Everyone can sort of feel very similar, and you see that in some of the creative in billboards, right? You might drive down the 101, and a lot of the ads look the same.
Well, we've seen for companies that do really well in out of home, and I think this broadly applies to every channel, is they go big. So you've heard of Brex, obviously, and Brex is one of our users, and they blanketed Soma in their out of home ads. In addition to doing very good PR, in addition to doing very good online marketing, all targeted to very specific, cohorts and to a very specific area, but they ensured that they saturated that market and they went big with everything. And so, like you said, they weren't thinking incrementally. They're like, look, we're going to own this market. It's a big market. And, that now they're, a multi-billion-dollar company. And so to your point, I think if the ambition is high, the marketing should match that. And that obviously, now with a lot of channels being pay for play with everyone, not just Meta and LinkedIn and X, but pretty much, Google as well, removing organic traffic and organic links, a lot of it is pay for play, and a lot of it requires just getting very creative with how you reach people.
Right. I mean, that Brex example is a great one, right? You saw Expensify in a similar space sort of also blanket all the buses around San Francisco and I'm sure around other areas. Now you see Ramp, another player in that space, also trying to win the war for attention with their out of home. And I would say that those guys are almost sort of an exception of seeing that sort of battle, and that's quite fun to see. I mean, for a lot of startups, their advertising is sort of proof of life. Here's my logo and my strap line. The strap line's probably got data or AI in it, and I'm alive, and it makes people driving past. It's good for the ego, right? I think you also see some in good advertising with companies like doing value proposition stuff, like Vercel's doing theirs with sort of the Friday, the Deploy on Friday cloud. Rippling's got the Rippling Effect program that they're running at the moment.
Some people don't like Rippling's billboards. I see people sharing pictures online. One of the cool things of out of home is really, though, that it's the one ad format people organically share online with their followers every day. And you can't really say that about much else. People don't even really share viral video ads much these days anymore.
No, and look, hey, that's why you've actually got video format. You've got formats of ads that are sort of for social, right? They're sort of video, they're artificial. You see Barbie coming out of a great box in Las Vegas. It's not a real billboard. Or you see Maybelline with her eyebrows on the subway in London, the tube, I would call it. Obviously that doesn't exist, but they're done for people to share online. They never really existed anyway. I think that's super fascinating, seeing those new formats. It sort of goes to my point about things are faster, things are more complex. You've got different ways. Do these ads is it really out of home if it never really existed, but people are sort of still getting the social share?
Yeah, You can do that, but then you don't have thousands of people organically sharing. It's just the brand. I want to take a step back and ask a different kind of question. So we started talking a little bit about channels and tactics, which is great. I could get in the weeds in that forever.
Yeah.
But I think the real value that an agency like yours offers a company isn't just to jockey channels. It's to think in terms of what the story is for a brand, and like, what can you do to make that company really stand out across channels and across everything they say. So can you share, maybe, we definitely have some younger founders who are just getting their first venture checks. Can you share a little bit of how you go about the sort of, the process of creating a brand from maybe a tech company that has a product or a solution but hasn't done much else?
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that first of all, branding is really something that you can start. It's really an investment, and you should start it as soon as possible. What does your company stand for? And the brand will live forever, for the whole trajectory of your company, and everything that you do should align for that. Now, I'm a marketing guy, and I'm bound to say that. But when we think about sort of differentiation, we're not talking about differentiation down a sort of feature level. We're talking about trying to be different across the board in all of our marketing, in our tone, and that should be then reflected in the product. So coming up with spending some time, once you've got product market fit, and the first sort of maybe A round on really what do we mean, what do we stand for, I think is often a step that companies can overlook. But if you have that sort of cohesion, it will then inform all of the different marketing activities that you do. And it can feel a bit sort of self-indulgent, right? Hey, what do we stand for? And what are our words? And but actually, I think it's the sort of touchstone that's not going to change. Of course, all your marketing tactics are going to change, but your brand should always stand for the same thing through the history of the company. And you can see that for the companies that do it. I mean, a lot of companies don't. And so when you look at them, you're like, okay, I don't really understand what this company does. But the ones who have invested that time, then then it becomes obvious, because it manifests in their marketing. And so then, this literally is codifying from the brand name. Brand name is part of it, the website, all that, the visual identity, the messaging, codifying all that so that it's cohesive will help you go faster later. And so I'm a big advocate of taking the time. Yes, your messaging can change because the market changed and the proposition has evolved and you're now going after these other verticals. But the essence of your company should not change. And that really does come down to the founding team at the beginning, what they value and what they think is important and why we're doing this in the first place. And that should then radiate to the people that you hire and the kind of customers that you work and the proposition and the whole business, really.
Yeah, I think for marketers listening, we can all thank Steve Jobs for really caring about marketing, because now a lot of otherwise very engineering minded folk actually will make the investment in brand. And I think Steve obviously was an amazing polymath, but he is also one of the best marketers in the world. He built the biggest company in the world. So I'll ask another question, not necessarily about Apple, but what is your take on kind of the, maybe not even tech, but beloved brands maybe doing things in the market, in their marketing, that don't quite hit and sort of make their sort of core market upset? Have you seen any of these examples, and have you had any thoughts about what's going on with some of these larger companies?
I do. You don't see it a ton in tech startups, which is my main space. But look, you definitely see it in, classic example, I don't know, Budweiser, right? They're suddenly embracing and foregrounding LGBT issues, which may not align with their customers' audience, and so consequently have been sort of boycotted. And I think it can be tempting for brands to sort of virtue signal around particular issues and to dive in. We've seen that a lot more. And look, that's okay as long as you are not going to change your mind. If you're Nike and you decide we're going to take a stand here and we're not going to change our mind, that's totally fine. Or maybe if it is fundamental, like Patagonia is only ever going to be sort of, against fossil fuels and that kind of stuff. So it's fundamental. But if it's not important for your brand to have a view on the conflict in Gaza, then you don't need to feel obliged to dive into it. And I think with my sort of PR hat on, I would probably encourage you not to. And certainly, if you do, you've got to be consistent about it, and you've just got to stand there, because the flip-flops are the ones who get sort of hated by the people who disagree with the initial stance, and then hated again when you reverse course.
Yeah, I think for a long time, a lot of marketing and PR people got hammered over the head with newsjacking, which is a great thing and can work well. But they took that to mean, oh, I should newsjack everything without any sort of thought as to how it fits in with the company. And actually, for the Bud Light thing, I'm all about inclusivity. What they should have done, and what an opportunity for a brand like that post-pandemic to do something inclusive. They should have shown a bunch of different people at a party all enjoying the product together. That's all they had to do, instead of, the weird sort of postmodern thing that they did. And the interesting thing is no one really likes that I talk to, of varying perspectives, but bring people together. And no one's going to get upset. It's like a universally great thing to do with the right ad creative. And, it's hard to imagine messing up a brand like that where you're selling beer. I mean, you're selling a good time. So that one was disappointing for me for seeing what some of our peers were doing. Because ultimately we have to undo that damage for our sector too.
Right. And so, just you can have a personal opinion on it, but does the company need an opinion on it? And sometimes they do have to step forward, and that's okay, but do it consciously and consistently if that's important for you.
One other thing that has shown for any doubters as to the power of marketing can add or take away billions of dollars in market cap. It is a double-edged sword. And so when you see the missteps and how volatile that can be, when you get things right, it certainly can go the other way. And I think that it's illustrative of marketing in a connected world. I think is just, it's so undervalued. And marketing and brand, you were talking about brands, are everything, right? There's any number of brands of soda I can get, and I'm loyal to Coke. Someone else was talking about, I forgot what actual, it was some technology we were talking about, and I'm like, but I want the Coke version. Like, I'm always just going to buy the Coke version because of brand. It's like so irrational, but I choose the same thing when I make a software decision a lot of times.
Well, right. And, Coke's a good example. Apple's a good example. The intangible value of their brand is actually a large portion of the overall market cap. And they didn't get to that point without investment and protection of that brand and making sure everything's sort of consistent with it. And the sooner that you start on that, the better, whether you're an early stage company or a late stage company. And so, absolutely. And you see it, with Apple now, with their sort of Apple Intelligence, right? They held back, and now they're going to be doing a new product here. They could have just gone straight in and AI washed the company early on. They probably held off. They held off deliberately. And now they're sort of pushing forward. We'll yet to see exactly how much uptake that will have. but they're going to do it in an Apple branded way. So it's going to be simple and elegant and meaningful, you hope. And that's because it's consistent with their brand. Had they launched in early, that would have been inconsistent with their brand. They weren't the first MP3 player by a long way. And so they weren't the first laptop, just choose any, obviously they weren't the first phone or the first watch. They went in with a more considered, better version. And we'll see that with Apple Intelligence, because that's their brand and they've invested it. And then they live it through their products. And it's that way around that they're doing it. And we recognize it as consumers.
Yeah. And Google wasn't first to search either. So all of Silicon Valley is like obsessive race to be first is I think it's a little pathological sometimes. Like, it's almost like back in the day, a forum poster like posting first, and that was like the whole reward.
Said first. Yeah. And look, speed of execution is important. Let's be clear, because and particularly also in marketing, trying something new and try it out. There's that's definitely a game to play. But I think history will show that the value comes for a lot of second mover advantage.
So Morgan, you mentioned AI. I have to ask every marketer about AI. You're a good one to ask because you're not just like a talking head or an executive. You also write, you also create, you publish. So you are a creator as well. So so much talk about AI. Do you want to say your opinion here? Is it overhyped? Is the excitement justified? Is it in the middle? What like if I'm a creative, is it over for me? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, so look, I'm excited about it. It probably is overhyped. And what do I mean by that? Look, if Nvidia's stock is the barometer of that, we're getting, we're getting really over our skis a little bit, but we're all enjoying the ride. I think it's as a marketer and somebody who sells marketing services, right? It is at one time a threat. Hey, if you can do this faster with a computer, I'm fundamentally selling my time and the time of my team. I could package it into value, but basically it's time. Could we be replaced? But it's also a huge enabler. Like, can this accelerate what we do and take away the boring parts or the repetitive parts and make it faster? So I think it is a brilliant time to be entering into marketing and being able to be the person who understands and can use these tools better than anyone else. We saw this back at the dawn of social media, right? No one had experience in social media. So, it was going to change everything because it was disintermediating the way that brands could interrelate with their audiences. And so it provided a huge opportunity, not just for individuals, but for whole companies. I'm not talking about the platforms like Meta, but for whole agencies to get in there and build their business and build their careers on it. And we're obviously at the same kind of inflection point now. I don't mean, hey, be a prompt engineer and you'll be set for good, because that will go away. But jumping into it, whatever stage of career you're at, is obviously going to be important. We very quickly spun up a team. We called it Firebrand Labs. They were going to look at, we looked at using the different tools to apply to the different types of services that we do. Sure, is it any good at copywriting? And we'd been using Writer and all those other things, Jasper, before. And it's okay. I think it's good at condensing material and coming up with headlines or paraphrasing things rather than taking a small signal and expanding it. It's great. And so for content writers, it's been fine, right? But it hasn't been as terrifying as I think a lot of copywriters felt this time last year. We found it super good at things like SEO. So for example, you have a large site, you do an audit, you realize that thousands of pages or hundreds of pages are lacking meta descriptions. It's very easy for something to go and read the page and write a pretty decent meta description that you can then insert onto the page. That is a job that I know that you've been at the front end of in the past. It's not a glamorous job, it's a very repetitive job. It's brilliant for AI. So, and those are incremental improvements for all of those pages, but it just needs to be done. And often it wouldn't get done because no one wanted to do it. Now that's happening. It's great for keyword research as well. ChatGPT is all sorts of ways you can use it to find out, act like a persona, and find out keywords that might be useful for you. So I think it's been overhyped, but actually now we're getting into some of the actual implementation and the shortcuts that it's providing, and people are leaning on it day to day. But I have to tell you, no client has asked me, what is our use of AI? Nobody has come to me as a prospect and said, we're really looking for somebody who's AI leveraged. We published an AI policy because I think it's important to say, hey, we're not uploading your confidential information into these models to be ingested, and we're all the work is going to be our work by a human. Again, I think it's important to have that policy internally, but it's not something that I think that marketers have become that obsessed with yet.
Yeah, and it would be a weird thing to ask an agency, because in a sense, you've been using AI, quote unquote, for a long time. If you use an analytics tool, you're still using AI. So I can't imagine, especially I'm a client now, I'm on the client side. I would never ask an agency, I would want to see work output, and I care less about how they get to that output. Is the quality good? Are they getting results?
That's right. That's right. We actually see it a bit more of a problem in some areas, and I'll give you an example. A lot of reporters are under a lot of pressure. They got to write quickly, and they'll ask for commentary on a particular issue, and it can be tempting for time-starved spokespeople to sort of put the question in ChatGPT and call that their quote and send it back. And obviously, reporters they want a quote from a human expert in the field. They don't want it from an LLM. And so, training people not to use that and catching that has, I'm not saying it happens with us, but you do see it a little bit. And you can hear ChatGPT's voice. So it's relatively easy to catch.
I personally find for the Gen AI stuff that, as a writer, because I also blog, and I think the better you are at something, the lower your satisfaction is with the output. But if you're not a pro at it, the output might be good enough. So for example, I use the image generation to create stock images that go with my posts to replace what I would previously go to Shutterstock or iStock. Sorry, John, about Shutterstock. They also have a Gen AI tool now, though, too.
Yeah,
so
they should.
I'm so bullish Shutterstock. I like the company.
Me too.
But I can get an image that I'm perfectly satisfied with to go with my writing. And now I don't, I'll bias to Creative Commons if I can find one, but in a lot of cases, it's useful for me. And so I get into the discussion with creatives because I also write music, and the AI generator for music, I actually think is terrible. It just does, it sounds like any given boring generic pop song. So it's even less interesting for me from a pure raw artist perspective. But I feel like if you need a good enough version of something as just a stock generator, it's fine. I think also for it's going to be cool for indie movie creators, because now if you're creating, a story, you could probably get unique, interesting, good enough B-roll that you add your filter with, and you previously might not be able to get it, or, you have to pay cost prohibitive amounts if you're a small creator. So to me, I see all these dystopian stories about everything's going to be AI slop, and it's going to be the kid cartoons. And I'm yeah, there's going to be that. But then there's also going to be creators who are artists will use whatever tools you give them. And if they're, good at their craft, they'll create something that's useful out of it. Or if they can't, they won't use it. And so I feel like these things are kind of eventually self-correcting, even if in the near term there's, spam or AI slop, as the media is calling it.
Yeah. And, that's definitely going to be an issue online. But I love your framing of, if you're good at a particular task, it's probably, it's an assistant that's maybe going to save you a little bit of time. But if you're incompetent at something, this is a great leverage. And I am incompetent at drawing, right? I lose every time at Pictionary. And so we had to do like a new logo for something. And I was able to use the tools to come up with a few options quickly of what I had in my head, but I could only describe it in words to sort of show someone. And in your and so that was a great example, because I could never have drawn that. And your example of a movie creator, like, I have a scene in my mind and it's going to look something like this. They can quickly type in the prompt and get it, help share the visual. Like, we'll sometimes do mood boards, or like sort of, if we're doing a video, we can sort of show, hey, it's going to look something like this, because then it gets it out of your head and something that everybody can objectively look at. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant for that. So
100%. So Morgan, do you want to talk a little bit about your story starting a shop? Because we definitely have listeners who want to one day maybe create their own startup, or maybe go out on their own and consult. You've had quite a journey. And so I know a lot of people get comfortable in their career and, might be at a company 5 or 10 years and, daydream of doing what you've done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's fine. Yeah. And look, so I'm obviously a Brit. I came over to the US in 2003, helped set up an agency here, and we grew it up to be about 250 people over here. So a good sort of mid-sized company. Overall company is about 600. And then in 2016, I decided, and I was there for 20 years. So to your point, I'm a big fan of longevity. I think companies grow over time, and I think you can evolve and grow if you're in the right place. So I think you can have a great career working within one company. But then 2016, having done it once, I decided to set up Firebrand and, choose a different niche. Okay, startups, do something much broader, much more integrated, because we do PR and content marketing and paid media and SEO, all these good things, which is what startups need. Here's what I'd say. It's a lot easier to do it now than it has ever been. And why do I say that? It's founding a company, really easy. You can go on LegalZoom and found a company. You can design your logo using AI, or just get one from Fiverr. You can go from 0 to 1 very quickly, and so you don't need an office anymore. You can be remote. In fact, a lot of people, obviously, the tools are all in the cloud. You don't need an IT person. We don't have a finance person. It's all outsourced to a third party. We've done that all the time. So you really can focus on the thing that you are the best in the world at, and put up your shingle. There's a big difference between being a freelance consultant and being an agency. Obviously, you're going to have payroll, right? You're going to hire other people and sell their time, basically, as well as your own, because we can all fill up our own time. We know enough people to go and do that if you've been in business for a long enough time. But trying to sort of build up a proposition that's far more entrepreneurial, and it's a lot of fun, right? Because it can be quite lonely being on your own. But I would say, I was impressed at how if you jump, people will catch you. America is a great place for entrepreneurs and people who they want to see you succeed. And so very quickly, people who I hadn't been in touch with for a long time, we met, and they were able to help me, even if they weren't able to they weren't in the market for what I sell. They were able to connect me, and people want to lift you up. And now we do that an awful lot too, because what goes around comes around. You build over time all the goodwill with the people that you work with, and they're only too happy to help, has been my experience. So I would say, though, it's going to take a lot longer to build than you think. So give yourself some runway in terms of income, and sort of make out your plan a little bit, and then double it, and you're probably closer. But it's extremely rewarding if you love what you do, the art of what you do, to then also have the extra benefit of being a builder of another company and employing people that can also fill their potential. I think it's a real privilege.
Well, Morgan, I think that's such a positive and great note to end on. We will put links to find you on social in the description. And is there a preferred place people can go other than LinkedIn and your website?
Yeah, those are the best. To be honest, those are the best. Morgan McLintic, McLintic, and firebrand.marketing. That's the website. And yeah, please ping me in reference to the show. I'd love to connect.
Well, thank you all for listening, and we will have a new episode for you next week. I will again put links to connect with Morgan in the episode description. Thank you, and have a great day.